Hari Om. Let us now continue. Further, in this verse 10, Shankaracharya uses the word Panditaha. To grasp Vedanta, one must possess intellectual competence. To grasp Vedanta, one must possess intellectual competence. Being rationally strong and logically strong. Essentially, it points to the definition that Swamiji gave us for the word Viveka. Viveka Shakti Vyaparaha. Essentially, putting to use or putting to practice or employing the God given Viveka Shakti. Put it to good use. One must possess intellectual competence, being rationally and logically sound. This requires education that fosters critical thinking. Even if not in the modern sense. When Swamiji says, even not in the modern sense, Swamiji is referring to traditional disciplines like Tarka, logic, Vyakarana, linguistics, and Mimamsa, scriptural interpretation, that can provide the necessary foundation. One need not necessarily go through Tarka, Vyakarana, and Mimamsa. The whole idea in tradition was to expose a student to these preliminaries so that the, the intellect is sharpened, is honed to be able to think clearly. Clarity of the intellectual application, applying oneself properly and clearly. To enable that, Tarka, Vyakarana, and Mimamsa were the channels that a student was exposed to in the tradition. As Swamiji would say, Swami Paramarthananda would say, in modern times, modern science, if one is able to expose, let's say, to geometry, solving theorems, solving riders, or solving problems in physics, chemistry, or any such, or numerical analysis in mathematics, it helps to sharpen the way of thinking, logical thinking, arriving at a solution to a problem in geometry, for example, solving a rider based on principles that have been learnt earlier, theorems that have been learnt earlier. Euclidean geometry is a nicely built up teaching over, it's a course of study. In the sixth standard, you're introduced to geometry, in seventh and eighth and ninth, right up to the 10th standard. So, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 5 years of solid Euclidean geometry. One is exposed to the Pythagoras theorem, and then later on to circles, to tangents, and everything else, quadrilaterals, and everything. All that. And then the corresponding riders. Then you do physical tracing out of circle and tangents with your compass and protractor and everything. So, all that is to help you to develop this sense of thinking. Swamiji would say, in modern times, it is enough that one is exposed to such subjects. The whole idea being to hone one's thinking faculty. That's about it all. You need not necessarily go through Tarka, Mimamsa, and Vyakarana. But without such intellectual rigor, Vedanta may be challenging to comprehend. That's the point. And alternate spiritual practices like bhakti, japam, or puja might be more suitable to help to prepare the intellect. The only difference between modern rigor and traditional rigor is that the language in which Tarka, Vyakarana, and Mimamsa were written is Sanskrit. And the Vedantic study is also, the Vedas are in Sanskrit. Vedantic study, Veda Purva Bhaga as well as Veda Uttara Bhaga or Anta Bhaga are all in Sanskrit. And there's a certain style of going about studying these channels, both the Veda Angas and Vedanta. So, when the student is in such a groove, it is easy to go with the flow. That's about it all. So, if you're not having that intellectual rigor, then it is better to go through alternative spiritual practices like bhakti, japam, and puja to prepare the antakkar. You know, so the whole idea is to prepare the antakaranam to develop this intellectual rigor in the uh, personality. So the whole thrust is to develop jnana yogyata. Several means of developing jnana yogyata. To take care of the emotional personality and the intellectual personality, because we have the manomaya kosha and the vijnanamaya kosha, and Krishna always says mayi arpita manobuddhi, mayi arpita manobuddhi. So the idea is to have a level headed approach, nicely balanced approach, by going through religious practices and through intellectual practices. One must have a level headed approach, not a lopsided approach, not leaning too much to the intellectual side, nor leaning too much to the emotional side. Walk the middle paths. So many paths can lead to this preparation. Jnana yogyata praptyartham. like multiple roads to a temple or multiple gates inside the temple to take you inside the temple. But liberation, for liberation, moksha prapti itself can be attained through only one path. That is self knowledge. Just as there is only one door to the sanctum sanctorum. So, this clarity, see, clarity at every stage. That is why you require to be clear about the the uh, the advantages and the limitations of every activity. How much can a particular activity provide results? I must know when to enter, when to delink, when to grow out. I shouldn't get stuck in a particular process. This intellectual maturity and understanding have to take place, has to take place in one's antakaran. So here the whole thrust that Shankaracharya provides is discussing the means of acquiring knowledge, emphasizing that there is only one effective method, which is Shastra Vichara or inquiry into the scriptures. And why does he do that? This is because the self is beyond perception. The self is beyond perception. It is not within the ken of the five organs of knowledge, the Jnanendriyani. It is beyond the realm of science, which relies on empirical data, which is not available for the self. Again, meditation can calm the mind but does not eliminate ignorance. This is what is actually meant by the word Pandita that Shankaracharya uses in this. One must possess intellectual competence. He must know where to look for what, or what will help him to look for what instrument will help him to look for what he is searching. He must know where to use science and where to use the Vedic pramanams. That intellectual capacity must be there. No acharya will reject science. He knows the advantages of science, he knows the limitations of science. This much and no further can science go. Science is king in its own realm. Vedanta is king in its own realm. Just like the eyes are kings in their own realm of form and color, they have no say in the realm of sound. And Just as the ears are kings in their own realm, they have no say in the realm of forms and colors. This clarity, this understanding should be there in an individual, a Pandita. He must also know that neither perception nor science nor meditation are the instruments to know the self. This much clarity also he must have. And therefore, he must be clear that Shastra Vichara is the sole viable approach for gaining self knowledge. Shastra Vichara is the sole viable approach for gaining self knowledge. Now comes the crucial question. What is the crucial question? The question arises, how can external scriptures, how can external scriptures, the Shastram, lead to the knowledge of the internal self? How can external scriptures, the Shastras, lead to the knowledge of the internal self? We will answer this important question in the upcoming capsules and take our study forward. Until then, Hari Om. Om Durjana Sajjano Bhuyad Sajjana Shantimapnuyad Shanto Muccheta Bandhebhyah Muktaschanyan Vimochayet Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevabashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om